So before we actually launch into the session, I'll just introduce myself. My name's Kerry Wilson. I'm the coordinator at Switch Your Thinking, which is a local government initiative which was founded by the City of Gosnells, City of Armidale and Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale here in Perth. We've been around for about 25 years now, teaching people about sustainability in business and predominantly focused on energy efficiency, water efficiency, waste and recycling, and greenhouse gas emissions reductions. This workshop is being made possible by the WA government. It's part of an energy efficiency pilot program that we've been running over the last 18 months, and funding has come from Energy Policy WA, who's in the Department of Energy and Economic Diversification, so we thank them for their support. Tonight's session has been presented by Phil Kemp. He's from Business Foundations, who are a not-for-profit organisation founded in Fremantle in the 1980s. So Phil and his team have been working in the business education and support space for a very long time, and are particularly passionate about business sustainability and supporting and enabling businesses to improve their practices in order to be part of that sustainability solution that we need in society today. Just to give you a bit of an outline of Business Foundations, it provides advisory and consulting services to small and medium-sized businesses pursuing decarbonisation and broader environmental sustainability. Their advisory team works with enterprises to create, review and refine sustainable business models, equip owners with the skills and knowledge to reduce emissions, improve resource efficiency and thrive in the transition to a low-carbon economy. Business Foundations help business owners adopt renewable energy, cut waste, embrace the circular economy and strengthen climate resilience. This is complemented by the work on behalf of governments, corporations and community bodies to drive low-carbon supply chain management, feasibility studies for sustainable projects and strategic planning aligned with net zero and environmental social governance objectives. We're very pleased to have Business Foundations a part of our pilot program, and so during the evening, please feel free to pop questions or comments in the chat. I will interrupt Phil if I need to. Otherwise, Phil, during the session, may ask if there are questions pending. So we'll sort of try to address those at a relevant time. Well, also, the session is quite long. So at around about 7:30, about halfway through the session, we'll take a 15-minute break in order for you to grab a cup of tea or whatever it is you need to do. And then the session will conclude at around 8:45. So great to have you on board. I will hand over to you, Phil. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Kerry, and welcome everyone to this session around energy and efficiency in small business. I hope everybody's doing well and have had a good day, and now have some time to think about your business and your business operations and how you might make them a bit more energy efficient, and tackle some of the issues around climate change and decarbonisation and the costs involved in running your business. What we're hoping to achieve tonight, and my thanks to Kerry and Switch Your Thinking for the opportunity to talk about this topic, because it's very dear to my heart and dear to the operations and the approach that Business Foundations takes with assisting our community and assisting business owners, particularly in operating their businesses. And that is taking an acknowledgement that we're all on a journey about energy and decarbonisation and environmental issues. And every business is at a different point in that journey. Every business has an opportunity to contribute to the need to decarbonise. So at the end of the day, what we're hoping to achieve is that you'll be able to take away from this workshop where you might be able to save electricity use in your business, and then where the consequence of that is that, where money is leaking out of your business. We're going to get you to prioritise some quick wins, so things you can do tomorrow to address the issue in your business. And then if you need, a bigger case of, it's having to spend money on batteries or solar panels or upgrading plant and equipment, a look at how you might fund that or take a business case approach to making those larger economic decisions for your business. And ultimately, it's, what I'd like you to get out of today is how you can reduce costs and your emissions from your business operations. So I just wanted to start with why we think this is important and why this issue is going to be the issue of the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years for our society and our business community. And the big issue here in Australia is that, after the climate wars of the previous decade, the Albanese government came in on a mandate in 2022 to implement the Paris protocols and commit Australia to a 43% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And they legislated that. And here I have a quote from Joe Longo, who is the chair of ASIC, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, that regulates businesses in Australia. And Joe makes the point that this is probably the most significant corporate change that Australian businesses have had to face in a generation. And I treat it very much like the change that happened with the introduction of the GST. It was a fundamental shift in the year 2000 to bring in a goods and services tax and totally rewrite the way businesses operated in Australia. Well, I would argue that the introduction of the climate change Paris Protocol Agreement, carbon reductions, is as big an issue as the implementation of the GST was in the year 2000. The timing's been really quick, and I think a lot of business people and the community in general probably haven't really quite appreciated what has happened in a very short period of time after the previous government's decade of not much happening in the climate area. But this slide makes the point that the legislation was introduced in March of 2024, and it got passed in September, and then it came into being on the 1st of January 2025. So we're now 12 months into this change in the way that businesses need to report on how they're going to get to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the government very wisely started with the very big emitters. And so the target was the big companies that emit a lot of greenhouse gases. But interestingly, the way the legislation was worded was that it caught the very big and it caught the very small. So from the 1st of January this year, 2026, small businesses who are part of the supply chain of those big emitters now need to report their emissions to the big emitters, who then report it to government. So this is the first time that small to medium enterprises in Australia are being captured by this legislation. So it's only been 6 weeks now since that part of the legislation began, which was the 1st of January this year. And then as the years go by, the 1st of January next year and the 1st of January in 2028, more companies of the bigger emitters are going to be brought into the carbon reporting system, which will capture more and more small businesses who are in the supply chains of those companies. So this is going to filter through the whole economy in a way that I don't think a lot of business owners are currently thinking 6 weeks into the start of this part of the legislative change. So this was the way the government organised the economy, and they took an approach of creating 3 groups: Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3. And these were the big emitters, and based on $1 billion of assets or turnover of $500 million or more. So it was capturing big business. And it's a staged approach. But this is the part where small businesses perhaps don't realise is that, and this is this slide just shows you some of the language around climate or emissions and emissions reporting. And this is where, we think as Business Foundations, who's here to assist the business community, run and operate their businesses, we're all going to need to take time, energy, and effort to learn the language of climate change and learn the language of greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So for those that perhaps don't know the differences between their Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, for every business in Australia, this is the framework that the government has implemented to capture and to understand how emissions occur in our economy. So just to very, very quickly go through it, our Scope 1 emissions for a business are the direct emissions that your business produces. So that mostly for businesses and including Business Foundations, our direct emissions are the emissions from our vehicles. So the petrol I put into my company vehicle and then I drive around in, that's my direct emissions. I'm directly contributing to greenhouse gas emissions by burning that tank of fuel on behalf of my business. So that's my Scope 1 emissions. Scope 2 emissions are what's known as indirect, and they're mostly for 99% of businesses from electricity that you purchase. So turning the lights on, as you can see with my light here and my computer, and the lights above my head, all of that is my Scope 2 emissions. So the amount of energy that I consume and the amount of carbon that is burnt to generate the electricity to turn the lights on is my Scope 2 emissions, or to power my plant and equipment, or power my till in the front of my shop. This is my Scope 2 emissions. And then there are Scope 3 emissions. And Scope 3 emissions is everything else in your business that you spend money on, which also includes your staff and how they commute to your work and to your place of business operations. But as you can see there, if you can see the slide carefully, it includes, your travel on an airplane, when you use a courier, when you buy food or catering for your business, excuse me, anything your business pays for, Scope 3 emissions captures the emissions that are created by you purchasing those goods or services for your business. And it's these Scope 3 emissions that the Group 1 emitters, the big emitters in our economy, now have to measure. And that's capturing small businesses. So which could be capturing some of you. And this is perhaps why this conversation is so important to be having in the 6th week or the 7th week of the year, because you may be asked by a big emitter, what are your emissions and how much carbon are you producing, so that they can count it in their emissions, which they report back to government. Anyway, that's the framework that we're operating in, and why now we believe, and Kerry believes at Switch Your Thinking, why energy efficiency is a conversation we need to be having with business owners in how do you reduce them. The easiest way to reduce your carbon emissions is just be more energy efficient. You don't have to do anything more than just reduce the amount of electricity that you use. So let's get into it. These are a couple of slides I threw in case you might be thinking, this doesn't affect me. Well, you'd be surprised. So you can see here on the left-hand side, these are some Australia's big companies. You can see Ampol, BHP, South32, Rio Tinto, ANZ, Bendigo. So the banks are involved in this. CNC Amatil, Fortescue Metals Group, CBA is the banks, Woolworths is there in that list. So you might be surprised to find that you actually are part of a supply chain that is considered one of these group 1 emitters, let alone the group 2s and group 3s that are coming into the system over the next couple of years. So you can see how the legislation has been constructed. It is meant to be capturing the economy's activities to try and reduce our carbon intensity to reach the Paris targets of a 43% reduction on 2005 levels of emissions. So these are the published targets from our major companies in the Australian economy, which you might be supplying to today. So this is going to capture everybody, and if it hasn't captured you yet, it will do into the future. And certainly by 2030, most Australian businesses, big or small, will need to have some understanding of the amount of emissions that they're creating. Just so you know, Business Foundations creates 40 tonnes of carbon every year. So it's a real thing. Okay, so today we're talking about energy efficiency. So why I think this matters now is that there are cost increases, even though here in Western Australia we're not part of the national energy grid on the East Coast. We have our own grid, which is called the Southwest Interconnected System, or SWIS for short, SWIS. Even though we have our own system here in Western Australia, our bills are going higher, particularly for big consumers of electricity, and particularly due to time of day costs. So some of you may be a very large consumer of electricity due to the nature of the work that you do, and you will already know that if you're using your plant or equipment between the hours of 3 and 6 o'clock at night in the middle of summer, when residents want to turn their air conditioners on, you know that you're paying more for that megawatt hour of electricity at that time of the day than you do at any other time of the year. And that's driving up prices overall for businesses. So costs are increasing. Also, what we're finding is that your customers are asking questions. So Group 1 emitters will be asking you for your emissions, but consumers are also asking. Consumers are becoming much more savvy in terms of where they spend their money and how those businesses, where that money is being spent and how they treat the environment. So you may be finding customers that are inquiring or want to know your environmental credentials. So to keep your customers or to grow your customer base, being conscious of your carbon footprint is not a bad thing. Supply chains are tightening their standards, so due to the legislative requirements, but also global pressures as well, particularly if you're trading into Europe. Europe has a very, very stringent regulatory environment regarding carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions more broadly. And so standards are tightening and businesses are having to respond, smaller businesses are having to respond to the needs of their bigger customers. And it's not just about the need to decarbonise because of the change in climate, but also this is good business decisions. Waste should always be eliminated in business. And if you're spending money on electricity that you don't need to, that's just money going out the door for no reason. So we think it's a really good idea just to be conscious instead of just flicking switches on and turning on equipment and never turning things off, and burning that electricity all hours of the day and night. Just having a think about those decisions and the consequences of turning things off and the benefit that that might bring instantly improves your bottom line without you having to do anything more than just turn a switch or put something on a timer, which we'll get into later on in the presentation. So it's an efficiency thing for us, for business, which we're big believers in. Businesses should be as efficient as they can be. And so it'll improve your margins instantly. And we also think it's the lowest risk starting point in the energy transition at all. It is the easiest thing to turn off your lights rather than put solar panels and a battery into your business operations and the costs involved in doing that. So it's the easiest and the simplest way to decarbonise, save money, and make your business as efficient as it can be. So we think the transition starts with energy efficiency. And it's immediate. So that, if you can get a takeaway from this part of the presentation, is efficiency is immediate. You just instantly get that result by not spending that money on electricity. We would also argue that the changes in the way that electricity tariffs are operating in the Swiss now and increasingly will do into the future as the grid changes and how it generates electricity for consumers across Western Australia in the Southwest Corridor. Demand in those peak times, if you can address consuming electricity in that 3 to 6 p.m. window in the afternoons, summer and winter actually, because more people are using heating from electricity than burning gas or burning log fires. We think that by reducing that load at that peak time saves even more money for your business. So we think it's a really great way to economize. We also think if you reduce your demand for electricity, you don't then need a bigger panel, solar panels, or a bigger battery. You can right-size those investment decisions in the technology for your business because you've right-sized the amount of electricity that you actually consume. So we actually see it as a saving on that side of the equation as well, because you're much more accurate in the amount of electricity you need to run your business rather than just be profligate using your electricity demand without thinking about it. And like I've made the point before, it's the fastest, lowest risk returns on your investment in your business. If you become more efficient, it will drive your costs down, and it's a very simple investment decision from there. So, like I said earlier, I'm not able to know from the audience what type of businesses you're in and how you operate. But in my experience, this is a rough kind of idea of where businesses spend money on electricity, and so depending on what type of industry you're in, but most businesses have some equipment that stays on 24/7. It's about 10 or 20% of your electricity that you use. Motors and machinery consume a third or up to a half of a business's electricity use. HVAC is air conditioning, for those that don't know the technical term. Air conditioning costs are rising because things are getting hotter. And our winters, are funny enough, are going to get colder because there won't be so much cloud cover because of the way climate change is affecting us in southwest or Western Australia. So air conditioning costs are rising, but it's about 15 to 25%, depending again on the size and type of business you got. Lighting is about 10 or 20%. And then having inefficient equipment is about 5 to 15%. So, but every business is different, and a retail business will be different to a manufacturing business, to a car showroom, to something else, a personal business running from home. So this is horses for courses, but I just wanted to make the point that there is certain industries and certain ways that businesses spend money on electricity and consume electricity, and it tends to be based on these sort of areas and in these sort of proportions. Excuse me. So let me just take a mouthful of this. So we're here at the treasure hunt audit, what I call the treasure hunt audit, and this is a process that we would suggest every business owner goes through, either on themselves, or they look at somebody like us, or they hire an energy efficiency consultant. But it's a simple way of looking at your business and just identifying, where you are spending that electricity, and what are you spending it on, instead of just getting the bill, giving it to the bookkeeper, or just paying it yourself and not even thinking about it or reading what's on that invoice from your electricity supplier. And I make the point, you don't have to be technical to do this. This is just a common sense approach at looking at how, what equipment is using electricity when, and then making some small and simple changes to reduce the consumption of power. So a very straightforward approach. So these 5 areas, based on those 5 areas of where businesses spend money on electricity, these tend to be the 5 reasons where energy leaks out of a business, which is costing, that business money. And it starts with always on equipment. And, every business does it. But there's equipment that just stays on 24/7, weekends, evenings, when nobody's around, and it just stays on consuming power. Inefficient motors and machinery, not having the right equipment. Poor control of air conditioning. And I don't know about you, we're an office-based organisation. We're always arguing of what's the perfect temperature. In the office, there's always people that think it's too hot or too cold. But there are ways of regulating temperature in office buildings and in industrial settings that can save you money. Lighting systems, because the way we've designed our buildings and because electricity was always never considered to be a big expense, lighting systems are mostly overdone. Most people have too many lights in their buildings. They're not needed or not required, or people just leave lights on 24/7. Lighting is an area to look at. And then, like I said, oversized or poorly matched equipment, equipment that's overpowered or underpowered and has to work harder, thus drawing more electricity than required. So these are the areas we're going to go through right now and get you thinking about your business particularly, and where you might find some savings on electricity. So I've got a photo here of the coffee machine that might be in your office, or think about your home as well. But every business has equipment that's running when there's nobody around or there's no value being created from it. It's just switched on. And a lot of businesses keep things running, over weekends and overnight for no reason, just that nobody's turned it off. And it's a really simple thing. And at Business Foundations, when we did our first carbon audit 3 years ago, what we identified, the 2 things that we identified, was our coffee machine and our photocopier. Both of them ran 24/7 over weekends. It never kind of mattered. We just left the things on. And so I just bought a very simple timer from Bunnings. So you could buy 2 back then you could buy 2 in a packet for $20. And it was just a timer, and it turned on, the coffee machine turned on at 7 a.m. in the morning and turns off at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because we realized nobody made a coffee after 3 o'clock. And the photocopier was 8 o'clock in the morning through to 5 p.m. and then it turns off. And so those 2, and these were just timers that plugged into the wall, into the socket, and then you plugged the power socket from the machine into that. And it just cut our consumption just overnight, straight away. It was like a 30% reduction in the photocopier costing instantly, because we didn't need it to be on standby. It just could turn off. And instead of having to rely on somebody every night to physically turn the switch, the little timer just did it for us. Very simple, very straightforward, and an instant saving for our business. I cannot highly recommend just going to Bunnings and buying these little devices, which are a fraction of the costs that you'll save over time, and turning your equipment off that you don't need running. So there's all sorts of things that run, and some may need to run for a purpose, for a reason, and that's fine. But find the equipment and things that are in your office and turn them off. The other one that I get particularly annoyed about, and you can ask any of my team, is monitors, computer screen monitors. You can just turn it off. It's not a big deal, instead of being in standby. Anyway, that's just my personal bugbear. I don't know about you, but that annoys me. For those of you that have motors and machinery, this is a big issue. Old motors consume more power. Modern, efficient electric motors are just so efficient. They instantly save on electricity if you buy a more updated or more modern plant or equipment. Particularly variable speed drives. I don't know if you have a business that deals with has a motor that's running and generating, friction, or, creating, turning something else. But variable speed drives just instead of a machine just running constantly, can up and down the required amount of power, and thus up and down the amount of electricity that they consume. Variable speed drives weren't a thing 15, 20 years ago. Now most machines will have some version of variability of consumption of power output, and thus a subsequent reduction in consumption of power. So we think that's a really important way that industrial businesses can reduce their power consumption. It has to make economic sense. So you need to, and there are ways of identifying, well, how much power am I spending on my machines currently versus buying a new machine that's more energy efficient? What's that delta? What's the difference between those two things? Can I save that money, and what does that look like over time? Which makes me, make a decision on whether or not to purchase the equipment or not. And there are ways about doing that, and we can help people make that decision and go through that decision-making process. But we would strongly suggest when your plant or equipment needs to be refreshed and replenished, then go for the version that decreases the amount of electricity required, which will decrease your carbon emissions and make your business more energy efficient. And here's a real-life example. This was actually a client of ours up in the Pilbara that had a whole fleet of light vehicles and heavy vehicles and machinery, and we stepped it out for them. This was from 2024. You can see there 14 years to 2038, or 15 years. They had some machinery that they bought in 2024 that had a 15-year lifespan, and so. But they wanted to decarbonise. Their customers were telling them they wanted to measure their carbon emissions and wanted it to start to decrease. And so we took this business on a journey of asset management and asset turnover, and stepping out the elimination of older equipment that consumed more or created more carbon emissions for newer and less carbon intensive equipment and vehicles. And this was their map. This is how they're going to manage a 15-year investment cycle in their own business to reduce their carbon emissions. So it is. We don't think it's something you need to, bankrupt yourself over overnight to meet an emissions target. We think common sense must prevail because your business still needs to operate over the long term. But we strongly believe in planning this out and turning out older, less efficient equipment for more modern, less carbon intensive equipment. Air conditioning, like I said, the big argument in most offices about how hot or cold it is inside. One of the things that we see is air conditioners that operate without any humans around. Again, people just don't turn them off. They just leave them on, or don't think it's their responsibility to turn them off. We also see that, businesses have systems in their offices or in their industrial units that just blankets the whole space rather than having zones or meeting rooms that have different systems so that not everything has to be on all at once. You can control which rooms have air conditioning in and when required. Here's a simple one if you don't know it, is clean your filters in your air conditioner. I don't know if you ever get involved in that level of maintenance for your business or even for your home. But you know, I go into a business premise, and one of the first things I try and listen to is if there's any whistling in the air cons, because the whistle is coming from a clogged air filter, which just means that the machinery, the air conditioning unit itself, is just going hard at trying to suck air through a clogged filter to then recycle back out as cold or hot air to warm or cool your room. Just clean the filter. It's one of the easiest things, and you'll get an instant reduction in your air conditioning costs, because the air conditioning unit's not having to work so hard to try and suck air through a blocked, clogged filter. We're also big believers of installing, plastic strips to cover, high walkway doorways instead of people opening and closing doors all the time. Just install a plastic strip in and people can walk through, but it keeps air on one side or the other contained. And it's air conditioning is one of these things we want to be comfortable. It's now with like I said, a rising warming climate and for West Australia an increasingly colder winter. It's going to become more important. All of us are going to be spending more money on air conditioning to keep ourselves comfortable. So in our homes and in our workplaces. So we think, it's many different little things. Brand new air conditioners consume far less power than older split systems do. So upgrading the machinery, keeping the filters clean, thinking about, weather seals or drafts or open doorways that perhaps you could seal over with plastic strips, all add up to controlling the environment, using what you need, and therefore not spending more money on air conditioning than you need to. Lighting, it's an obvious one. And, thankfully in Australia, we've had the shift from light bulbs to LED lighting now. And that's been at least 10 years, I think, since you can't buy an old-fashioned globe. But nonetheless, it's not just switching your globes out. It's the configuration of lighting, which we think is the next great frontier. Most offices that you go into have too much lighting from a modern day perspective, because people didn't care about it. They just installed it and nobody mattered. It didn't matter to anybody. So we're big believers of getting that right, which mostly means reducing. And you can easily reduce. You don't have to have, in my example here, you can see there, just a long strip of LED, tube lighting in an office space. Every second one of those could be reduced. You could take out one of the tubes, or every second one take both tubes out. There would be very little impact on the overall lighting, but the impact on electricity consumption would be significant. So have a think about lighting, and instead of having to reconfigure things physically, just take bulbs out. And don't have as many bulbs on at any one time. A bit like air conditioning zones, having lighting zones is really important, so that if you don't need lights on somewhere. Sensors are increasingly being used in office spaces, so when you walk into a meeting room, the sensor will notice that and turn the lights on, and then 5 minutes after the motion stops, the lights just automatically turn off. So motion sensors are being used a lot now in more modern buildings. They're being installed automatically just to keep those costs, that overuse of lighting down, and thus reducing costs. So like I've said here, we think it's probably the first place to start is actually lighting, um, and just take a look around, and look at the lights and go, do I really need these on? Can I change the density of the lights? Remember to turn the lights off when they're not needed. And I mean, this is a specific one, but it is a real issue for the industrial areas of Perth, particularly for small businesses in those that do manufacturing or have plant and equipment. Is getting the right equipment for the job that you do, and mostly these days that's older and less efficient equipment versus more modern, variable speed drive engines and more efficient electric motors that just consume less power for the power output of the machine. I mean, this is a bit of a specialty topic, but it's an important one. Think about it also, in an office context, it's making sure your laptop and your your computer screens, or making sure that all that equipment is the correct size and specifications for the jobs that you actually need to do, rather than having overdone equipment that you're spending more money on electricity powering. Okay, so we've gone on a bit of a journey in the last 45 minutes or so, which was about, why the imperative for change is required, and the legislative framework that the Australian economy is now operating in. The reason why small businesses might want to tackle carbon reduction, and perhaps the easiest way they can tackle carbon reduction is by becoming more efficient in how they use energy. We spoke about the 5 areas where we find businesses spend money on electricity, in motors and machines, in standby equipment that's always on air conditioning systems, on lighting, and then in oversized plant and equipment that's not fit for purpose for the actual productivity of the business operations. So they're the main areas. We've had to think about, well, how do we go around with a clipboard and take a look at our businesses without needing an engineering degree in electricity, and think about, well, why is this machine on? Can we do something about our lights? Can we put some screens up, or make our air conditioning systems more efficient? So they're the sort of areas where we think you can concentrate on. So once we've got to that point, then it's about measurement, and about measuring the amount of electricity that you are consuming, understanding a few things about that. So we are big believers that one of the first things you should do tomorrow morning is get your electricity bill and have a look at it. I can't tell you, when I ask this question to a room full of people, if I ask them when was the last time they looked at an electricity bill, can you tell me your electricity rate? How much do you spend per kilowatt hour? You'd be surprised perhaps to know most people don't have a clue how much they actually spend per kilowatt hour on electricity in the Southwest Interconnected Grid. So strongly advise you to do that tomorrow morning, is not just look at the monthly total and the amount you have to pay, but actually interrogate your bill. Have a look at how many units you consume and what rate you're being charged. And if you're on a variable rate, depending on time of day, how much you're being charged at certain times of the day is also important. So we're big believers of getting that interval data, through how much you consume throughout the working day, and you can get that from your portal. If you're with us, with Synergy and you're a consumer-based business, or if you're in what's known as the uncontested market for electricity, you can get that from your energy retailer who's providing you with the electricity. So, like everything in business, good data means you can make better decisions. So we are big believers of making sure you understand your data, and that starts with reading your bill. So what the bill's actually telling you, and there's an example of a synergy one, which if you don't get in your business, at least you're getting at home anyway. Is how much power do you use when no work is happening? So that's that interval data. It's really interesting when a business sees how much they consume from 5 p.m. at night, let's say, to 8 a.m. the following morning, what that amount of electricity looks like, and therefore, of course, making you question, well, what have we got on that's using that electricity, that's consuming that electricity? So it's a really great, interesting point to start on, is looking at your electricity consumption over a 24-hour period, over a whole week, including the weekends, and seeing where the peaks and troughs are, and then what's that base load at night or on weekends when nobody's around, generating income for your business. We're increasingly seeing those network charges being a more significant part of the bill. So what your provider is charging you just to be connected to the grid. And if your tariffs suit your operating hours, some businesses can switch plant and equipment and machinery to different times of the day and take advantage of lower rates of electricity per kilowatt hour. Some can't, and there's not much they can do about that. But if you're in a business that hasn't even thought about that question, think about it. Can we turn an piece of equipment off in that peak time between 3 and 6 o'clock in the evening, and use it some other time? And does that, and then the business implications of that, rostering, staff use, can you change the operations to suit the tariff rather than the humans, perhaps, and change the way things are done? But small changes can create large benefits, and every business is different, but it's something that we strongly advise to look at. Excuse me. Smart meters. So increasingly, and you've probably, again, thinking about your own homes here in Perth, Western Power's been going around suburb by suburb, slowly changing everybody's meters to smart meters that are connected to a grid, so nobody has to come along anymore, excuse me, and read your meter like they used to, as it's all done electronically through the power system. But those smart meter data is giving, what it does for your business is gives you more data to base your decision making on. We also strongly believe in sub-meters, so different parts. If you're on a large site, or you're an industrial business, and you've got different equipment on different doing different things at different times of the day, you can put meters on all of those things to understand how much each machine or piece of equipment is consuming, and then make decisions more granularly on which piece of equipment should be used when. So some of this stuff requires external expertise, and getting somebody in, an electricity consultant, to come and look at your operations, but it could be money well spent if you're spending a lot of money on electricity, to think about these things. We always suggest start small, learn, and then gradually incorporate what you learn from changing behaviours into how your business operates overall. So once you have all this data, what do you do with it? And so we think you benchmark what really matters. So depending again on horses for courses, what business you have and how it operates and what you do, but is to start considering, and all businesses I think will ultimately get there, given the changes that are happening in our economy and the push to decarbonise our productivity in Australia, is that we'll get to a point where we understand the energy per unit of output of your business. So how much energy is being consumed to generate an output? And we just see that coming into all types of operations, and the amount of energy that you're using per operating hour in your business. And so, as we started off this presentation tonight, electricity and energy is not just something you pay a bill for and ignore now. It's a real input cost into business, and it's something that businesses are increasingly going to have to address, either through the carbon emissions legislation, or their consumers are demanding it, or that you're just wanting to be more efficient and drive cost savings in your business. All of us are going to need to learn about electricity in a way that we've never had to worry about before. Here are some common mistakes that we've seen when we've worked with businesses on this topic. And it's only looking at the monthly total, taking the bill and going, oh, look, I spend, $10,000 of electricity a month. So, and, might go up a little bit in summertime, but that's just the air conditioning or whatever is the normal excuse. But it's just looking at monthly and not looking at that interval data on a daily or weekly basis, and understanding the peaks and troughs in your business and how that links to what it generates or the outputs that are created by your business. Like I said, I'm really one of the easiest places that you can find savings is that base load, all that equipment that's always on. Just think about not just in your business, but just think about your house and your own home. There's stuff that you leave on all day, all night. Turning those things off and unplugging them from the wall or whatever can make big savings over the long run. So looking at your interval data from your business for when your business is closed, your consumption when you're closed, or consumption on weekends when you're closed, is a really good way of saying, we've got some stuff here that we could address. Demand changes. So increasingly businesses are being charged more for that 3 to 6 p.m. time. So when increased demand on the grid is happening, the power producers do charge more for their kilowatt hours per kilowatt hour. So, you need to, again, increasingly need to understand, when am I consuming power during the day, and can I shift power consumption to cheaper times of the day? Which is, again, an interesting change for businesses that have never had to worry about these things. Not having ownership of your own data. This is an issue in WA, particularly for if you're in a building with other tenants and you're only just getting a price per month to pay as part of outgoings. That doesn't give you enough information of your consumption and how you consume power through the day or the week, because technically you're not the you don't have the relationship with the energy producer. The building does, or the landlord does, the owner of the building. So that's a increasingly real issue, and what we're finding is businesses are taking control of that and asking their landlords for more granular information on what electricity consumption looks like for their part of the building, which may require a sub-meter or some other mechanism. But nonetheless, that's an increasingly part of business operations, is having to tackle that issue when perhaps, again, they've just paid the bill and not thought about it. And taking reviews. Things change. What you do this year isn't necessarily what you did 5 years ago. So it's not a set and forget. All of these changes require a regular review, which may not need to be any more than a year for businesses, but maybe it's more often than that, depending on the type of business you're in and the dynamic environment, economic environment you operate in. But we would strongly advise a regular review process as well, to go, okay, we need to look at what we've got, what we're spending our money on electricity, and how we're consuming it and when. So, common question I get from business owners, well, how long is it going to take till I pay all this investment off? How much is it going to actually save me if I keep paying my bill, Phil, and I don't have to worry? I've been paying it before, I'll pay it in the future, and I just can't be bothered. So it's pretty straightforward to find the differences between doing something and doing nothing, and then factoring that price difference into a cost saving for your business every month or every year, and then dividing the cost of changing equipment or changing air conditioning systems, or perhaps putting solar panels and a battery into your building or premises. and making that payback period decision based on the amount of money that you would save from reducing your electricity consumption. And government does have incentives. I mean, currently there's an incentive for homeowners to put batteries and solar panels onto their roofs, and the federal government and the state government will provide a subsidy for the cost of that. What that means, of course, is that just all that does for homeowners is reduce the payback period. The government's providing a financial incentive that reduces the price of the unit, which means you can spend more money on getting a bigger battery, which means that you can reduce your consumption and thus reduce the payback period. For most people that I speak to that have gone down the battery route, they're looking at payback periods of 4 years, 4, 5, 6 years instead of 10 or 12 years when the technology was starting to get rolled out into residences across Perth. 4 or 5 year return on investment is a fantastic result for a homeowner, given that most homes are owned between 7 and 10 years. So you'll actually get the savings in your pocket after the payback period has ended. So like I said, there's ways you can do that, and happy to have that conversation with anybody after this or whenever. The other thing that you get, and this is things that business owners don't often think about, is not just the cost saving, but the other benefits that you might derive from looking at your energy and finding those savings and efficiency gains. And that's if you spend money on new equipment, then they don't break down as often because they're brand new, and modern day equipment is far more likely not to break down than perhaps older equipment once was. It reduces maintenance costs. Improved reliability means that your equipment just operates so your workers or yourself can just generate the outputs of your business without there being any problems. Staff comfort. That really, my head was, when I was writing this, was thinking about air conditioning. If your staff are comfortable because the air conditioning settings are right and the building's right, then they're going to be more productive. They're going to be more comfortable. They're going to enjoy being in the office more. And then there's also the insurance impacts too. People don't often discount the insurance costs. Having older, less efficient equipment can come with risks, and the insurance industry loves good risk because they charge you for risk. So it can have an insurance impact by being more energy efficient as well. So I've been doing a lot of talking, and hopefully you're still with me on this journey. So at Business Foundations, we're really practical people. We're not very wanting to make things more complicated than they need to be. So I think I've said a few times, but start with what's cheapest first, which in most cases is lighting, take out bulbs, reduce the number of lights, turn switches off. Buy those cheap Bunnings timers for electrical items. Plug them into your machinery, turn them off over weekends. If you don't need them, turn them off. Just set them automatically. You just set and forget, and you don't have to worry about it ever again. You'll get instant savings, become more energy efficient just overnight by doing these things. When you upgrade your equipment, think about the consumption of the equipment, energy consumption. These days, most modern equipment will tell you their energy consumption per hour. Find equipment that is more energy efficient. Purchase that instead of what you've always done. We're also big believers of not being overwhelmed. There's a lot of noise in this area. There's been a lot of noise in climate change and decarbonisation in the economy, in the news, in the media. A lot of judgment, a lot of finger pointing over the decades. So don't be overwhelmed by any of this. Start slow, do the quick wins, make the easy changes, and build on learning. Learn as you go, read your electricity bill, make decisions based on facts. Don't get sucked into consultants or providers wanting to sell you a battery or solar solution. Do your own research, do your own homework, start small, and go with that. And like I said, make sure you do some reviews. Change in any operation might have other impacts. So do a regular review that makes sense for you, and keep learning. But we're big believers of just do something. Just start small, make a change tomorrow, and go from there. The first point there I started with is every kilowatt hour you save will cut your costs. So energy efficiency really is a no-brainer. And the benefit for all of us is that it'll create instant environmental benefits as well by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So, win-win-win. And like I said, customers are increasingly valuing this, and we're advising everybody that we talk to about this issue, tell your customers you're doing it. Tell your retail customers, put it on your website, tell your industrial customers or your clients, tell them what you're doing. You're saying, look, we're going to tackle energy efficiency. We're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions because we're going to do X in our business. And we think that by telling people what you're doing, other business owners will see that and hear that, and then they might do something, and everybody wins by tackling this issue together. So we think, tell everybody. But increasingly, and because of the legislative changes, bigger businesses are asking for this information as well. So there's lots of ways to measure, and I've got a slide coming up that talks about, has some tools, or if I haven't included it, I'm happy to share through Kerry some tools that are available online to, if you want to go the next step beyond energy efficiency, is to start actually measuring all of your greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions from your business's activities. There's lots of free tools and resources available online from the Australian Climate Change Commission and others, environmental groups and others, looking at how businesses can measure emissions, which of course is about leading to a reduction in emissions. So there's lots of change happening in this area, and it's a pretty dynamic space. But it's happening, and it's going to increase over time. So we strongly advise that tackling it now. This is just another slide looking at it again from an electricity perspective. If you reduce the amount of energy you use, you're not going to expose your business to increasing power prices. Any tariff changes that might happen through synergy, although Western Australia has been pretty good at keeping our power prices flat with only small increases over time, unlike the East Coast, which has been a bit more variable than us. More control over your operating costs. We just think this is good business practices to think about these issues. Now, I have put a slide. I mean, the conversation has been all about electricity, but Kerry, if you can forgive me for a moment to talk about gas, because in WA, lots of businesses use gas, particularly restaurants in a small business setting, but industrial businesses use gas to create heat, and heat's used for all sorts of industrial purposes, to manufacture all sorts of things in Western Australia, and those businesses are here because we've had plentiful, cheap natural gas from the Northwest Shelf, particularly, and the gas reserve policy that West Australia has enjoyed for the last 20 plus years. So gas is a big issue, and we come across it all the time. What we say to people, if you are using gas, is to look at the electrical options, to turn off the gas, because gas is clearly it's a carbon emitter, and every kilojoule of gas you burn has a consequence in your emissions numbers. So, these days you don't need to use gas to create hot water. There's heat pumps that do that very efficiently. There's electrical systems in terms of induction cooktops, and you don't have to use gas for everything. We just think we need to have a conversation, particularly in West Australia, about gas usage and how we get people to reduce their reliance on gas and increase their use of electricity instead. But anyway, I just thought I'd have one slide to mention gas, because it's often get asked about gas. It's not all about electricity. It also includes gas. The other slide that I haven't put in, Kerry, you'll be pleased to know, is I haven't put one about diesel fuel, because that's the other big cost in Western Australia. Because of our large distances, a lot of businesses spend a lot of money on diesel. And electrification of fleets of trucks and vehicles is another big issue. Perhaps that's a seminar for another time. But there's a lot of diesel fuel being burnt in the great state of West Australia, which again can't keep going. So we need to find ways to electrify our fleets of vehicles as well. Okay, let's bring this home. Talk about you specifically in your business. So I'm a big believer in breaking things down into manageable bits. Like I said, tomorrow, when you get to your office or place of work, is find your electricity bill. Step one. Have a look at it. What does it tell you? What's it saying to you? If it's a monthly bill with a monthly total, it's probably not detailed enough. The next step is to find your interval data and see if you can get down to daily and hourly consumption rates. If you've got a smart meter, you should be able to get that data, and then that data will give you better decision making. But that's tomorrow. But we would normally talk about 90 days, 3 months, 12 weeks, which is really only 60 working days if you work Monday to Friday. But is in the next 3-month period is find something you can tackle. If that's lighting, if that's air conditioning, if it's changing out a piece of plant or equipment, but is tackle one thing and say, okay, I'm going to deal with that energy use there. There may be that trip to Bunnings when you're there on a Saturday or a Sunday for family reasons, is to buy a few of those timers and put them on your office equipment. So I would suggest just doing one thing. Find the time, fix that, see the next month's bill, make the difference in savings, and go, okay, I can see the direct impact by making that one change. I'm going to do other things as I go along. But give yourselves 90 days. If you can do it quicker than that, great. But most people kind of get to it in a 3-month period. Build momentum. Like I said, I think energy efficiency is going to be a way we will just do business into the future, because we're going to need to know our carbon emissions, and electricity use is going to be the way most businesses burning carbon. So do the easy things first and build from there. Now, I think I've got a slide on teams. So like I said, a lot of this is about human behaviors, not turning lights off, not turning computers off, leaving doors open for air conditioning systems, just our general day-to-day, the way we operate. So we're big believers of bringing teams of people together on this journey. So if you've got a team of employees and people that you work with, is bring them on the journey, bring them into the tent, ask them, what can we turn off? What can we not use? When could we shift our production to a cheaper time of the day? Get them involved, and then show them the savings, show them how it has a direct impact, that change that Jill suggested has had this impact on our carbon emissions or on our costs in terms of electricity. So bring them into the tent on this issue, get them thinking about how they can make those savings. it isn't just about money, it's also about the environment and decarbonisation. So talk to them about what matters to them and bring them in on the journey. And I think it's a really useful way for business owners to really get commitment and get change happening, is bring the humans with you on this, because you're going to need to rely. You're not there perhaps all the time, and so your people are going to have to behave in the way you need them to. So bring them on this journey as well. And we've seen some really transformational behaviour changes just by owners of businesses being open to what they're doing on this topic. And here's just some tips about that. Explain to them why it matters, make the expectations clear, change the behaviours and share the results. I think you'd be surprised if you have an honest conversation how people might enjoy that, and see how you're taking leadership in your business to address this issue. Some things I want you to think about as we finish up this evening is waste is really easy to find. If you put your waste lens on, take your glasses and put your waste glasses on, you'll see it around your business. If you look for it, you'll find it. You'll go, yeah, that photocopy's on, or the hot water system's on, just, we don't need it to be. So really strongly advise you to think about it that way. I also strongly advise of, actually walking through your business and looking at the things and how people behave. And really small changes do make big differences. It is only these small little incremental things, but they do have a big impact, both on dollars and carbon. Efficiency, I'm a big believer that efficiency does reduce business risks. If you're much more efficient as a business, you're much more resilient to changes that are happening in the economy or in society, which is a good thing to be for your business. So strongly link business strategy and efficiency and resilience all together. For me, that's all very much a bundled set of ideas nowadays. And I cannot strongly advise to start tomorrow, and improve over time. You won't get it right. Not everything is right on day one, but start now, learn, change, grow, adapt, learn again. So, but just start now. Here's just a very simple framework. Just action, cost, saving, time frame, and who's responsible for doing it. For most business owners, the responsibility is all them. So it's really easy. Put your own name down there for each one of who's responsible. But once you've walked around your business with your clipboard and you've thought about all the things, it's always a good discipline just to write down a small little action plan. Go, what's the action? How much money is it going to cost me to change? What's the saving going to look like? When should I do it by? Like I said, try something in the first 90 days from today, and then who's responsible for doing it. So just a very simple planning tool, but I use it for all sorts of things, and I thought I might share it with you guys just to get your head thinking about how do we make this happen, how do we make it real. Look for the quick wins, identify long-term projects. Like I said, tell everybody, tell your customers, tell your staff, tell everybody you're doing it. I think that's a really important message for all business owners these days. Switch to LED lighting, use smart meters, turn off equipment. Like I said, turn off the lights. And longer term projects, and this is where perhaps another presentation, another topic talks about, how do we actually decarbonize our supply chains and decarbonize our businesses, is these days with those short timeframes in terms of solar panels and batteries in return on investment, it's just increasingly a no-brainer to invest in that technology for your business to decarbonize your electricity. So, there's all sorts of ways to plan for that, and that's not for today, but is to think about rooftop solar and battery storage systems for your business, and invest in more energy efficient equipment. Upgrade to newer, more modern plant and equipment, and get those cost savings into your operations today. Like I said, good energy management is good business now. It's now part and parcel of business. It's increasing cost to businesses, and it should be something that we need to address. So I cannot more strongly advise all business owners to make it part of your practice. This is some of the questions we would do if this was a live studio audience. We'd sort of talk about these things and get you guys talking. Perhaps this format's not that environment. Kerry, maybe somebody's asked a question, but here's some of the questions that I'd be asking you if you were here with me. What's your biggest energy cost in your business? Where do you think you're wasting power if you just thought about it off the top of your head? What's on that shouldn't be on? What's the first change you'll make tomorrow morning? And then how can we help you achieve any of this? There is some government funding, and Switch Your Thinking is part of, I suppose, a government system of looking at these issues. But there are carbon grants, there are EV charging grants for EV chargers in your business. They're from the state government. The Australian government has a range of funding programs for businesses depending on sector and issues that they face, which you may be eligible for. Happy to have a conversation about that some other time, or ask Kerry, or look at Switch Your Thinking's website for a range of government programs and initiatives that can help support your business go through this transition. And then we've done something, because we get asked these questions a lot and have been increasingly so in the last couple of years, is we created a guide to getting to net zero, which you can find on our website, or Kerry, I can get Kerry to email it to you. But it's a step-by-step guide, really practical, plain language support for business owners to go, well, how do I handle any of these issues? And energy efficiency is tied to decarbonisation and achieving net zero. So we just created a very simple guide to just inform Western Australian-based business owners what steps they should take, practical steps today, tomorrow, and the next day to tackle the issue.
Yeah, look, that getting to net zero, I think it's a brilliant resource as well, and just goes to show how serious you sort of take this sort of subject, and how you'd like to make it easier for businesses to get on that road to net zero.
Yeah, Kerry, we just think, there's just been so much noise about this topic over the last decade, that I think business owners just get overwhelmed and they think, oh, this is all too hard, So we just wanted it to be really practical, just go, really point people in, make these small changes here, get the benefits in your business now, learn as you go. Let's not have perfect be the enemy of the good, and just be, all learn together. I think, I just think it's a really important message for business owners, is that they can do things. It's not overwhelming. The issue is enormous, but you can make small changes that will contribute.
Yeah.
So the guide's a very practical, plain language guide to go through the journey.
Yeah, and like you said, apart from the cost savings, there's some really great opportunities to differentiate yourself in a business from other businesses that are out there trying to compete for that business. So to be able to spruik environmental credentials, or be proactive in this sort of space, can be very beneficial. So
yeah, and I think it affects all sectors. The one that I'm interested in a lot is the medical sector. Actually, it's we all go to the doctor. We all, unfortunately, as we get older, increasingly go to specialists and all sorts of, hospitals and medical practices and all sorts of things. You've got a group of consumers, perhaps younger than me, millennials and Gen Zs, where this stuff really matters to them. If your medical practice is net zero, what could that tell to your younger customers and expand your practice? Because young people want to know that when they get seen by the GP, the imaging machine or the specialist, the imaging machine's being powered by green energy or something. I think this is going to affect us in ways we haven't really thought about, and I think some industries just haven't considered that they're part of the solution, if you know what I mean. And I'm really interested in, restaurants going net zero, um, you know, yeah, just medical centers, dentists, all, sort of businesses that you wouldn't necessarily think should or have to deal with these issues, start going down that path. Retailers that are net zero. It's yeah, I think it's an interesting space to be in, and it's a dynamic time. I think there's a lot of change happening in the economy, and people are putting their money where their thoughts are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it pays to be on the front foot, and there's no harm in fumbling around and doing a few things and
Yeah.
not quite getting it right, and then yeah, doing it which suits the business as well. So, like you say, there are so many different types of businesses,
Mm.
and the way that energy efficiency and cutting costs may be in one business won't apply to another business. So, deep diving into what it is your business uses in terms of electricity or gas or diesel and those sorts of things does look different for everyone. And there is actually a good resource on the Horizon website, which is like a simple business energy audit as well, which might interest people out there.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
there is. Yeah,
All right. Well, just once again, thank you very much, Phil, for your time tonight and your knowledge, and just another acknowledgement of energy policy WA support through the Department of Energy and Economic Diversification for making this session possible tonight. We'll wrap it up now. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.